It was 6:30 a.m. on a foggy October morning when Jessica Martinez, a 34-year-old pediatric nurse, finally got into her car after a long and emotionally draining 12-hour shift. The world outside was still cloaked in early morning mist, the sky a dull grey with the faintest hint of sunrise peeking over the horizon. She was exhausted, her body aching, and all she could think about was getting home to her small apartment in the suburbs of Houston and collapsing into bed. Her Honda Civic hummed softly as it sped down the mostly empty stretch of Interstate 45, about 30 miles outside of the city. Jessica had driven this route countless times. She knew every bend in the road, every rest stop, every billboard. But on this particular morning, something caught her attention in the corner of her eye. It was just a flicker, a shape on the grassy shoulder of the highway. At first, she thought it might have been debris, maybe a plastic bag or a piece of shredded tire. But as she drew closer, her heart skipped a beat. There, barely visible through the thinning fog, was a tiny figure sitting completely still near the edge of the road. Jessica slowed her car instinctively, leaning forward to get a better look. And then she saw him. A small German Shepherd puppy, no more than 8 weeks old, sat facing the road like he was waiting for someone who had left and wasn't coming back. Jessica's breath caught in her throat. The puppy wasn't moving. He wasn't barking, wasn't whimpering, wasn't even looking around. He was just there. His little ears drooped flat against his head. His body was slouched forward in a posture of quiet defeat. His head hung low, and his eyes, dark brown, almost black, stared vacantly at the passing cars as though the world no longer meant anything. Without a second thought, Jessica pulled her car over onto the shoulder, a good 50 feet ahead of where the puppy sat. She turned on her hazard lights, threw the car in park, and stepped out into the chilly morning air. Her nursing instincts had been honed through years of caring for fragile children who couldn't speak their pain but showed it in their posture, their silence, their eyes. And everything about this little dog screamed trauma. She approached slowly, gently, speaking softly like she did with the most frightened children in her care. "Hey there, little guy," she called out, crouching a few feet away. "What are you doing out here all alone?" The puppy turned his head ever so slightly and looked up at her. Jessica nearly gasped. His eyes were filled with a sadness so raw, so deep, it almost seemed human. There was no recognition, no spark, no hope in his gaze. He didn't run toward her for help. He didn't run away in fear. He simply sat there as if he had given up on the very idea that anything good could ever happen again. Jessica lowered herself slowly onto the dewy grass, careful not to startle him. From this closer distance, she could see just how bad things really were. The puppy's ribs were clearly visible beneath his thin coat, which was dirty and matted with small clumps of grass and dirt. His legs had scrapes, fresh ones, along the knees and paws, and his face bore faint but recent scratches, like he'd been trying to push through brambles or bushes. "You're safe now, sweetheart," she whispered, extending her hand palm up toward him. "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm here to help." The puppy hesitated. His nose twitched as he sniffed the air, then her hand. But there was no wagging tail, no leaning forward in curiosity, just that same vacant stare. Finally, he leaned in and touched her fingers with the tip of his nose, like a ghost brushing against something once familiar. Jessica fought back tears. This wasn't just an abandoned puppy. This was a soul that had shut down. She slowly, carefully reached under his chest and lifted him into her arms. He didn't resist. He didn't even flinch. In fact, the moment her arms wrapped around him, his body went limp, as though the tension inside him had drained all at once. He collapsed into her chest like a child too tired to cry. Jessica held him close, cradling his frail body against her nursing scrubs. His heartbeat pounded against her ribs, fast, erratic, terrified, but his eyes remained heavy and distant. She carried him to her car with deliberate steps, trying not to let the weight of emotion overwhelm her. As she settled him gently onto a blanket in the passenger seat, Jessica whispered a silent promise. "Whatever happened to you, little guy, I won't let it be the end of your story." She looked at him once more before starting the engine. He lay curled up, unmoving, eyes half closed, barely blinking. He didn't cry. He didn't make a sound. But in that moment she understood. This tiny creature had once known love. He had known safety, and now that love was gone, the safety had vanished, and all that remained was a hollow shell of what a puppy was supposed to be. Jessica glanced at the highway stretching ahead of her. Cars whizzed past, oblivious to what had just happened on the shoulder. To them, it was just another commute, another day. But for her, everything had changed in the space of 5 quiet minutes. She put the car into gear and merged back onto the road. The fog had lifted a little, and the sun was beginning to rise over the horizon in golden streaks. In her rearview mirror, the empty patch of grass where Buddy had been sitting faded into the distance. But in her heart, something had taken root, an unspoken connection, a bond formed not from wagging tails and playful barks, but from shared silence, shared sorrow. Jessica didn't know it yet, but the journey she had just begun with this grieving little puppy would test the very limits of her strength, compassion, and faith. It would take them both through the depths of loss and the heights of healing. And it all started here, on a foggy stretch of highway, with the saddest eyes she had ever seen. Jessica didn't waste a minute after arriving home. She gently carried the tiny puppy, still curled like a shadow of himself, into her apartment and wrapped him in one of her clean nursing scrubs to keep him warm. The apartment was quiet, sunbeams just beginning to filter through the blinds, casting soft gold across the floor. But there was no comfort in it for the puppy. He didn't whimper, didn't move, just stared blankly ahead with those dark, sorrowful eyes that haunted her thoughts. Knowing he needed urgent care, Jessica called the nearest emergency veterinary clinic and was relieved to learn that they were open and could see them immediately. Within 30 minutes, she was at the clinic, cradling the pup in her arms like a fragile patient. Inside, the sterile smell of antiseptic and the quiet hum of equipment reminded her of the pediatric ward where she worked. But this time, she wasn't the nurse helping a child, she was the one hoping someone else could help. Dr. Amanda Chen, a compassionate 41-year-old veterinarian with 15 years of experience, greeted her in the exam room. Her voice was calm and steady, the kind that soothed anxious pet parents. She gestured toward the table as Jessica carefully laid the bundled puppy down. "What's his name?" Dr. Chen asked, gently beginning the exam. Jessica shook her head, still stroking the puppy's soft ears. "I don't know yet. I found him this morning sitting on the side of the highway, just sitting there, like he'd given up." Dr. Chen's brows furrowed in concern as she examined the puppy's frail body. He weighed just 12 pounds, far below the normal 18 or more for his age. His ribs were prominent, his coat dull and matted. Small healing cuts lined his legs and snout, and his paws were raw, possibly from walking a long distance. But what disturbed Dr. Chen most wasn't the physical damage, it was his demeanor. "He's unresponsive," she murmured, waving a hand gently in front of his face. "No fear, no curiosity. That level of emotional shutdown is extremely rare in puppies this young." Jessica bit her lip. "He just looks so sad, like he doesn't think anything good will ever happen again." Dr. Chen nodded. "Puppies are naturally resilient. Even when neglected, most still react to touch, to noise, to food. But this little one? It's like he's disappeared inside himself. Whatever happened to him, it wasn't just physical, it was emotional. He's grieving." The word hit Jessica like a tremor. Grieving. Yes, that's exactly what it looked like. She'd seen that look in the eyes of parents who had just lost a child. That same emptiness, that quiet surrender to sorrow. Dr. Chen moved to the counter and retrieved a microchip scanner. "Let's see if he has a chip," she said, running the device gently over the pup's shoulder. A soft beep. Then the screen blinked. "He's microchipped," Dr. Chen said in surprise. "Registered to a family in Beaumont, Texas. The Hendersons." Jessica felt a strange mix of hope and dread stir in her stomach. On one hand, the puppy had a family. That meant he wasn't just a stray. Someone had loved him once. But on the other hand, how had he ended up in this state? "I'll call them right now," Dr. Chen said, picking up the phone. Jessica sat down beside the examination table, eyes never leaving the pup's frail body. He hadn't moved since she brought him in. His head rested on the table, eyes half-lidded, as though every breath was too much effort. She whispered softly to him, "We're going to figure this out, little one. You're not alone anymore." A few moments later, Dr. Chen turned back, phone pressed to her ear. Her eyes widened slightly, then softened. "Yes, ma'am. We found a young German Shepherd puppy with your microchip information. Yes, he's here now. He's safe." There was a pause, and Jessica could hear the muffled sound of a woman crying on the other end. "Oh my God, you found Buddy," the woman sobbed. "We've been searching for him for 3 weeks. Please tell me he's okay." Jessica's breath caught. Buddy. He had a name. Dr. Chen's tone shifted, more serious now. "Mrs. Henderson, I need to be honest. Buddy is in very poor condition. He's severely underweight and emotionally withdrawn. He'll need intensive care and attention." There was silence on the line. Then a broken voice replied, "We want him back, but I don't know if we're the right people for him anymore." As the story unfolded over the call, Jessica sat in stunned silence, trying to absorb the heartbreak. Mrs. Linda Henderson explained everything. Buddy had belonged to her 16-year-old grandson, Tyler. Tyler had been given Buddy for his birthday, just 2 months before tragedy struck. He was driving to his part-time job when another driver ran a red light. Tyler died at the scene. "He loved that puppy more than anything," Mrs. Henderson wept. "After the accident, Buddy just stopped living. He wouldn't eat. He'd lie in Tyler's room and cry." Jessica's eyes blurred with tears. Everything made sense now. The vacant stare, the stillness, the overwhelming sadness. Buddy wasn't abandoned. He was mourning. "And then," Mrs. Henderson continued, voice barely above a whisper, "during the funeral, someone left the back gate open. Buddy disappeared. We think he went looking for Tyler." Jessica pressed a hand to her heart, stunned. The image of the tiny puppy sitting at the side of the highway hit her with new weight. He hadn't been waiting for help. He had been waiting for Tyler. Dr. Chen's voice was gentle. "Mrs. Henderson, it's clear that Buddy's experiencing profound grief, and I understand you and your family are grieving too. But he needs more than just a place to stay. He needs someone who can help him heal." A long pause. "Then we're elderly. Tyler's parents, they're not doing well. We want what's best for Buddy, but we don't know if we can give him what he needs." Jessica looked down at the puppy, the way his fragile frame rose and fell with each breath, the way he seemed caught in a storm that no one could see, and felt something shift inside her. "I can help him," she said quietly. "I don't know how yet, but I know I can." Dr. Chen relayed Jessica's offer to Mrs. Henderson. After a tearful, heartfelt discussion, the decision was made. Jessica would foster Buddy while the Hendersons took time to process their grief. It wasn't a goodbye. It was a gift. A chance for Buddy to be with someone who understood loss and had the strength to face it. As Jessica gathered Buddy in her arms once more, wrapping him gently in her scrub top, she kissed the top of his head. "You had someone who loved you," she whispered, "and now you have someone else who will fight to help you remember what that feels like." The drive home was silent. Buddy rested against her chest, the faintest sigh escaping him as though, for the first time in weeks, he was starting to let go of his fear. Not entirely, not yet, but enough. Jessica didn't know what lay ahead. But she knew this: he wasn't alone anymore, and neither was she. Bringing Buddy home felt different this time. Jessica wasn't just carrying a lost puppy, she was welcoming a grieving soul into her care. The small apartment was quiet as always, but now it had a new presence, a weight that was both fragile and profound. Jessica had set up a soft bed for Buddy in the corner of the living room, near a sunlit window. She placed him there gently, watching as he curled up immediately, head tucked into his paws, his body language still heavy with despair. For the first week, Buddy barely moved. He would lie in that same corner, staring blankly ahead, barely acknowledging Jessica's presence. He didn't bark. He didn't cry. He didn't wag his tail. When she set out bowls of fresh water and soft food, he wouldn't touch them unless she hand-fed him bite by bite, whispering gentle encouragements between each mouthful. Even then, he only ate enough to survive. Jessica had seen emotional shutdown before, in children who had experienced severe trauma. She recognized the signs, the silence, the disinterest, the hollowness. In many ways, Buddy reminded her of the young patients she worked with, especially those who had faced unbearable loss. She treated him like she treated them, with patience, structure, and quiet compassion. Every morning before her shifts, she would kneel beside him and say, "Good morning, Buddy. You don't have to be okay today. Just try to be here." And every evening when she returned, she'd sit on the floor near him and talk softly about her day. not expecting a response, just letting him hear the sound of a caring voice. She told him about her patients, without revealing names or details, about how some were scared, how others were brave, and how she often felt helpless, even though she tried so hard. Sometimes she cried as she spoke, the pressure of her job and the helplessness of Buddy's sorrow merging into one quiet grief that filled the room like fog. "It's okay to miss him," she would say to Buddy as he lay still, his eyes glazed with emptiness. "Tyler loved you. I know he did. You don't have to forget him. But you don't have to go through this alone anymore either." On her days off, Jessica stayed close to Buddy. She would read nearby, do laundry, or study for her nursing certifications, all while remaining within his line of sight. Occasionally, she would move to sit a little closer, just a few inches each time, never forcing contact. She wanted him to know that presence didn't have to mean pressure. That love could be quiet. By the second week, she began to see small shifts. Buddy started glancing at her when she moved. His ears would twitch at certain sounds. Once, when a siren wailed in the distance, he lifted his head slightly, then lowered it again. These were tiny, almost imperceptible changes, but to Jessica they were monumental. They meant that somewhere inside, Buddy's spirit hadn't completely shut down. It was hiding, waiting, hoping. Recognizing that she couldn't do it all alone, Jessica reached out to Dr. Chen for advice. Dr. Chen, in turn, referred her to a veterinary behaviorist, Dr. Rebecca Martinez, a soft-spoken woman with kind eyes and years of experience treating animals suffering from psychological trauma. Dr. Martinez made house calls, which was a blessing given Buddy's fragile state. During her first visit, Dr. Martinez knelt beside Buddy without touching him, simply observing. After a few minutes, she nodded thoughtfully. "He's grieving," she confirmed, echoing what Jessica had already suspected. German Shepherds are highly intelligent and emotionally sensitive. They form deep bonds, especially if they're raised closely with one person during their early developmental stage. Jessica nodded, eyes on Buddy. He was Tyler's puppy. They were together all the time. "That makes sense," Dr. Martinez said gently. To Buddy, Tyler wasn't just a person. He was his entire world. And when Tyler died, Buddy's world ended too. The words struck Jessica deep. She had known grief, had held the hands of grieving parents and seen the emptiness in children who lost their sense of safety. But seeing it in a puppy, it somehow made the pain even more raw. Because Buddy couldn't speak, couldn't ask questions, couldn't understand why his boy was gone. Dr. Martinez devised a gentle behavior recovery plan. No discipline, no forced engagement. Just presence, routine, and gradual emotional reconnection. She taught Jessica how to establish emotional check-ins, moments where she simply sat nearby, breathing deeply, allowing Buddy to sense her calm. "Healing takes time," she reminded Jessica. "You can't pull him out of this, but you can show him there's something worth coming back to." And so Jessica did. Every day she showed up for him. Some days all she could do was sit near his bed and read aloud. Other days she would play soft music and hum along while tidying up, hoping the gentle rhythms might comfort him. Then, during the third week, something changed. Jessica had returned from a particularly difficult shift. A young patient had passed away, a boy not much older than Tyler. The weight of it sat heavy on her shoulders as she walked through her door. She didn't turn on the lights. She didn't take off her scrubs. She just dropped her bag and sank to the floor next to Buddy's bed, her head resting on her knees. "I know you're hurting," she whispered through tears. "And I wish I could take your pain away. I see these kids every day, and sometimes I can't save them. I feel like I'm failing everyone, including you." She didn't expect anything. Buddy hadn't moved for days. But then a soft sound, a barely audible shuffle on the floor. Jessica lifted her head. Buddy had raised his own. Slowly, cautiously, he crawled toward her. His tiny body trembled with the effort, but he made his way across the short distance and gently laid his head on her lap. Jessica froze, then let out a sob, this one full of gratitude and awe. She brought her hands slowly to his head, stroking behind his ears. Buddy didn't move. He simply stayed there, as though saying, "I know pain too, and I know what it means to feel alone." From that moment on, something shifted between them. Buddy began to seek her out, not for play or affection, but for quiet presence. When she cooked, he sat in the kitchen doorway, watching. When she studied, he curled near her chair. When she cried, he would lie at her feet, offering silent company. Jessica still spoke to him often, not expecting words in return, but knowing he understood in ways that didn't require speech. She found that caring for him helped her process the emotional weight of her job. The helplessness that sometimes came with trying to heal children whose battles were bigger than medicine. "You know what, buddy?" she said one evening as they sat together on the balcony watching the fading sun. "I think Tyler sent you to me. Maybe you needed someone who understands that healing takes time, and maybe I needed someone to remind me that love really is worth waiting for." And in response, Buddy gave the smallest tail wag she had seen since the day they met. It was just one wag, just one flicker of light in the darkness, but for Jessica, it was everything. 3 months had passed since Jessica found Buddy on the side of that foggy highway, and though the wounds of grief still lingered, they no longer defined every breath he took. In that time, a quiet rhythm had formed between them, a bond forged not by games and laughter, but by shared silence, gentle companionship, and the slow rebuilding of trust. Buddy had gained weight. His once dull coat now shimmered with health, his ribs no longer protruded through his fur, and his eyes had begun to reflect something Jessica hadn't seen before: presence. He was still quiet, quieter than most puppies his age, but now his stillness felt intentional, not empty. He no longer collapsed into the corners of rooms like he wanted to disappear. Instead, he positioned himself close to Jessica, always within reach. Not demanding, never intrusive, just near. Jessica had begun integrating Buddy into her routine even more. She brought him along on errands, allowed him to sit beside her while she studied, and, most significantly, started bringing him to the hospital during her shifts as part of a therapy animal visitation program. Though he wasn't officially certified, his calm demeanor and intuitive sense of children's emotions made him the perfect comforter. Sick kids, frightened kids, children who wouldn't speak, all of them seemed to respond to Buddy in a way that defied explanation. One young girl in particular, a cancer patient named Lily, had barely spoken in days. But when Buddy walked into her room, she reached out with a trembling hand, stroked his head and whispered, "You're so soft," before breaking into tears. Jessica had seen parents cry just watching their child come alive again, if only for a moment. And every time she looked down at Buddy and whispered, "Thank you." It was on a quiet Tuesday evening in January when everything changed. Jessica had just gotten home, Buddy lying curled at her feet as she prepared dinner, when her phone rang. The caller ID showed Mrs. Henderson. She answered immediately, heart suddenly tight. "Jessica," Mrs. Henderson's voice trembled with emotion, I have something to tell you. About Tyler." Jessica's hand froze over the stove. "We just found his journal," Mrs. Henderson continued. "His mother finally felt strong enough to go through his things. We didn't know he'd been writing, but what we read, it explains so much about Buddy." Jessica lowered the heat and sat down at the kitchen table, holding the phone with both hands. Buddy sensed the shift in her posture and lifted his head to watch her. "Tyler was planning something," Mrs. Henderson said, voice thick with emotion. "He was going to train Buddy as a therapy dog." Jessica's breath caught. "He wrote that after surviving leukemia at 12. He wanted to give back," Mrs. Henderson continued. "During his cancer treatment, therapy dogs had helped him so much. He never forgot that. He said in his journal that he wanted Buddy to bring comfort to sick kids, just like those dogs had comforted him." Tears welled in Jessica's eyes. Buddy, lying at her feet, rested his head on her slipper. The pieces began falling into place. His patience with children, his ability to sense when someone was afraid, his instinct to stay calm near medical equipment. It hadn't just been luck or temperament. It had been training. It had been intention. "There's more," Mrs. Henderson added, voice barely above a whisper. "Tyler had already started working with him, teaching him to sit quietly near hospital beds, not to be afraid of IV stands or beeping monitors. He said Buddy had a gift, that he could just feel what people needed." Jessica covered her mouth, heart swelling with realization. She looked down at Buddy, who now sat upright beside her chair, ears tilted as if listening. He wasn't just healing, he was fulfilling a promise, a mission. "I've been taking him to the hospital," Jessica finally said, her voice thick with emotion. "He's been helping the children. I didn't know it was what Tyler had planned, but he's already doing it. just like Tyler wanted. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then a soft sound, a sob. "Tyler's parents. They've been following Buddy's progress through me. They want to meet him. And you. They'd like to see what Tyler's dream has become. Would that be okay?" Jessica nodded, even though no one could see. "Yes, of course. I'd love that." The meeting was arranged for the following weekend at a local park, neutral ground where Buddy could feel comfortable and where Tyler's parents could see him in the open, safe and calm. Jessica felt anxious leading up to the day. What if Buddy didn't recognize them? What if it triggered his trauma? But when David and Susan Coleman arrived, Jessica immediately recognized Tyler in them. David had his son's eyes, sharp, kind, a little tired. Susan had the same gentle expression Jessica had seen in the old family photo Mrs. Henderson had once shown her. They were in their early 40s, both carrying grief like it lived in their bones. But when they saw Buddy, their faces lit up. "He looks so much better," Susan whispered, tears already gathering in her eyes. "Tyler would be so happy." David knelt down not too close and held out his hand. Buddy approached cautiously, sniffed, and then gently placed his head beneath David's hand. It was not the response of fear or confusion. It was familiarity, as though some trace of Tyler remained in their scent, in the soft way they spoke. Jessica stood quietly, tears running down her face. "He's been visiting children in the pediatric ward," she said softly. "Helping kids who are scared, kids with cancer, kids who remind me of Tyler. He's doing everything Tyler hoped he would." David looked up at her. Tyler wrote that he wanted Buddy to be a bridge between sadness and hope, that even if he didn't live long, he wanted to leave something behind that could help others find joy again. Jessica nodded, her voice breaking. "Then I think he succeeded." They spent the afternoon walking, talking, sitting on benches as Buddy played gently with children who came up to him in the park. Susan watched him with quiet reverence, as if seeing something sacred. Before they left, the Colemans made a decision. "We'd like to help you officially adopt Buddy," Susan said, "and we want to support his training. We want him to become a certified therapy dog, in Tyler's memory. You've given him love, purpose, everything Tyler dreamed of, and we want to help make that dream real." Jessica couldn't speak. She could only nod as tears fell freely down her cheeks. That night, as the sun dipped below the horizon and Jessica sat on the balcony with Buddy beside her, she whispered into the quiet sky, "You knew, didn't you? Somehow, you knew." Buddy's head rested against her leg. His tail wagged just once, slow and sure. And Jessica knew that love, when given freely and carried forward, could do more than heal. It could fulfill destinies, even those left unfinished. The following weeks marked the beginning of a transformation deeper than anything Jessica had anticipated. With the support of the Colemans, Buddy was officially adopted and enrolled in a professional therapy dog training program. The sessions were held 3 times a week, and Jessica adjusted her hospital shifts to make sure she could attend each one with him. It became their shared mission, not just to fulfill Tyler's vision, but to help Buddy fully embrace his purpose. Buddy took to the training with quiet determination. His instructor, Mark Rodriguez, a certified therapy dog trainer with over a decade of experience, quickly noticed something special. "He's got an intuition I rarely see," Mark said after their first session. "It's not just obedience, it's emotional awareness. He reads the room better than most people." Jessica watched as Buddy learned how to navigate hospital corridors without hesitation, to remain still and calm when children cried, to recognize when to approach gently and when to simply lie close and offer silent support. Mark often remarked that Buddy didn't just learn commands, he anticipated needs. "He doesn't do tricks," Mark explained during one session. "He provides comfort. That's not something you can teach. That's something born of experience." For Buddy, the change was evident. The haunted look that once clouded his eyes had faded, replaced by a steady, gentle presence. He was still quiet, still reserved, but now he radiated purpose instead of sorrow. His movements became more confident. His ears perked more often. And when he sat beside a sick child, it was as though his very presence told them, "You're not alone." Jessica saw it too. She saw it when Buddy sat patiently beside a boy with severe anxiety who hadn't spoken in days, and the boy finally reached out to stroke his head. She saw it when a toddler undergoing chemotherapy stopped crying the moment Buddy rested his chin on the edge of her hospital bed. And she saw it when Buddy instinctively leaned into a mother's lap as she silently sobbed while her child underwent treatment. Helping others was helping Buddy. It was healing the parts of him that grief had tried to silence. And in return, Buddy's gentle strength was healing those around him. One morning, during a hospital shift, Jessica stood outside a patient's room, watching through the glass as Buddy lay beside a young girl with a bald head and tubes in her arms. She was drawing with shaky hands, and Buddy remained perfectly still, his eyes fixed on her, his breathing calm. The girl looked down at him and whispered something. Jessica didn't hear it, but she saw the girl smile. It was the first time she'd seen her do that in days. Later that evening, Jessica and Buddy sat together on their balcony, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. The January air was crisp, but the warmth between them was unmistakable. "You're doing it," Jessica whispered, running her fingers gently through his fur. "You're becoming exactly who Tyler hoped you'd be." Buddy rested his head on her lap, his tail thumped softly against the wooden deck. The Colemans continued to stay involved, attending some of the training sessions and visiting on weekends. Jessica welcomed their presence, recognizing that they were not just grieving parents anymore. They were partners in a mission, family in a new form. Susan often brought photos of Tyler, candid snapshots of him hugging Buddy, teaching him to sit, walking him in the backyard. Jessica placed some of them around her apartment. They weren't reminders of loss. They were symbols of legacy. One Saturday, after a long training session, Mark turned to Jessica as they watched Buddy settle into a downstay beside a child in a wheelchair. "It's like he was born for this work," Mark said. "But I think it's more than that. I think Tyler gave him a head start. That boy must have loved this dog like his own shadow." Jessica nodded. "He did, and Buddy, he's carrying that love forward, one hospital room at a time." Buddy passed his final evaluation with near-perfect marks. The certification ceremony was held at Houston Methodist Hospital, in the same pediatric wing where he had already helped dozens of children. Staff, patients, and families all gathered. Dr. Chen attended, her face glowing with pride as she watched the puppy she had once examined on a table, broken and unresponsive, now walk confidently down the hallway in a therapy dog vest. The Colemans were there too, standing beside Jessica. Susan held a small velvet pouch, which she handed to Jessica before the ceremony began. "I thought you might like this," she said softly. Inside was a custom-made patch embroidered with the words, "Tyler's Legacy." Jessica blinked back tears as she fastened it to Buddy's therapy harness right above his name tag. The patch gleamed proudly beneath the fluorescent hospital lights. As the hospital director presented Buddy's certification, a gentle round of applause filled the corridor. Children clapped from their beds. Parents smiled through tears. Nurses and doctors nodded, some with their hands over their hearts. Jessica crouched beside Buddy, hugging him close as cameras flashed and cell phones captured the moment. "You did it," she whispered in his ear. "You really did it." The celebration was followed by a quiet gathering in the hospital garden. Jessica, Buddy, the Colemans, and a few close friends sat on benches beneath fairy lights strung between trees. A cake had been prepared, and one of the nurses handed Jessica a framed certificate with both her and Buddy's names on it. "This isn't just about a dog," the nurse said warmly. "It's about a journey, about healing, about the impact one boy's dream can have when someone else is brave enough to carry it forward." Jessica looked down at Buddy, who was lying peacefully at her feet, tail gently sweeping across the grass. "We're just getting started," she said. And they were. Over the next few weeks, Buddy began working more shifts with Jessica, participating in therapy sessions, comforting families, even being featured in the hospital newsletter. Word of his work spread. Donations began pouring into the new foundation the Colemans and Jessica were quietly building, an organization that would eventually train more therapy dogs in Tyler's name. But none of that mattered to Buddy. What mattered to him was the quiet moments. The soft pats from small hands, the whispered thank yous, the feeling of being near someone who needed him. One afternoon, Jessica took him back to that park where he had first met the Colemans. They sat beneath the same tree, the breeze brushing through the leaves. "Do you remember this spot?" she asked, looking down at him. Buddy looked up, ears alert, eyes calm. "You were so scared back then, so lost. But you're not lost anymore." His tail wagged once, slowly. And for Jessica, that was enough. Enough to know that the boy who had once dreamed of giving hope through a dog had succeeded. That grief, when given the space to heal, could transform into something beautiful. And that sometimes the quietest souls carry the loudest love. 2 years had passed since that foggy morning on the highway when Jessica first spotted the tiniest, most broken puppy she had ever seen. Now, that same puppy, Buddy, was a certified therapy dog, a gentle presence in children's hospitals across Texas, and the heart of something much bigger than either of them could have imagined. Jessica and the Colemans had officially launched the Tyler Coleman Foundation for Pediatric Therapy Animals just a few months after Buddy's certification. What started as a simple desire to honor Tyler's dream had evolved into a movement. The foundation began recruiting, training, and certifying therapy dogs to visit hospitals, treatment centers, and children's care facilities. To date, 12 other dogs had joined the program, each bringing their own healing touch to the lives of children battling illness, trauma, and fear. But Buddy remained the soul of the foundation, the original, the one whose journey had inspired it all. At Houston Methodist Hospital, he was now a beloved fixture. Nurses greeted him by name. Children would light up when they heard his soft steps in the hallway. Parents often whispered thank yous through tears, touched by the way he seemed to know just where to sit, when to approach, and how to comfort without words. Jessica, too, had grown through the journey. She was no longer just a nurse. She was a founder, a mentor, and a voice for the silent bond between children and animals. She'd learned that healing wasn't always found in medicine or procedures. Sometimes it came in the form of a furry companion who simply sat beside a frightened child and made them feel safe. One of their most profound experiences came during Buddy's visits with a little girl named Emma. Emma was 8 years old and had been diagnosed with the same type of leukemia Tyler had survived years before. But unlike Tyler, Emma wasn't responding well to treatment. She had withdrawn completely, refusing food, refusing speech, and barely acknowledging her doctors. Her parents were distraught. Nothing seemed to reach her. Jessica remembered the day she brought Buddy into Emma's room. The child lay curled under her hospital blanket, her face pale, eyes vacant. Jessica said nothing. She simply walked Buddy to the foot of the bed and sat in a chair nearby. Buddy stood there for a long time, unmoving. Then, without a cue, he gently stepped forward and laid down near the side of the bed, his head resting on his paws, eyes watching Emma with quiet patience. It took several minutes. Then, slowly, Emma reached out one trembling hand and touched his head. "Hi, pretty puppy," she whispered. Those were the first words she'd spoken in nearly 2 weeks. Emma's mother gasped. Jessica covered her mouth, tears burning her eyes. Buddy didn't move. He stayed perfectly still, as though he understood how sacred the moment was. Months later, after Emma completed her treatment successfully, her mother approached Jessica at a hospital event and hugged her tightly. "Buddy saved my daughter's life," she whispered. "He gave her a reason to fight when she had given up." Stories like Emma's became more common as the foundation grew. There were children who began eating again after bonding with a therapy dog, others who faced scary procedures with newfound bravery, and siblings of sick children who found joy in playing fetch with the dogs while their families were in crisis. Everywhere Buddy went, he brought peace. Not flashy, not loud, but profound. At home, Jessica and Buddy shared a quiet life. Their small apartment was filled with warmth, soft blankets, stacks of children's drawings, framed photos of therapy visits, and most importantly, pictures of Tyler. The Colemans had gifted Jessica a collection of photos from Tyler's brief but beautiful time with Buddy. Tyler holding Buddy as a puppy, Buddy licking Tyler's nose, the two of them curled up together asleep on the couch. Jessica displayed them on the mantel, beneath a wooden sign that read, "Love doesn't end, it becomes legacy." Each night, Jessica and Buddy would return home from work, share dinner, her at the table, him on his mat with a bowl, and then settle into their evening routine. She'd read on the couch or review foundation applications, and Buddy would curl at her feet or beside her on the floor, always close, always content. Sometimes Jessica would talk to him in the quiet. "You know what, buddy?" she'd say, rubbing his ears as he closed his eyes in comfort. "Tyler's love for you didn't stop when he died. It just changed shape, found a new path, a new purpose." Buddy would respond the same way he always did, with a gentle nuzzle, a slow tail wag and a peaceful sigh, as though saying, "I know. I feel it too." The foundation continued to thrive, expanding into new cities, partnering with pediatric centers, and training teams of therapy animals and handlers. Jessica began speaking at conferences, sharing their story not as a fairy tale, but as a testament to the power of love, loss, and healing. She talked about how sometimes the greatest pain could become the greatest gift, if only someone chose not to give up. Buddy, now a little older, moved with a touch more deliberation. His puppy energy had long since settled into a calm, assured presence, but his spirit never faded. He was still the dog who had once sat motionless on the highway, broken by grief. And he was still the dog who had found a reason to live again by helping others. His presence became a living tribute to Tyler, a boy who had dreamed of helping others and had, through Buddy, made that dream a reality. One afternoon, during a sunny spring fundraiser at a children's hospital, Jessica stood beside a photo display set up for the event. Parents and staff walked by, stopping to look at the side-by-side images of Tyler and Buddy, of sick children smiling beside the therapy dogs, of families holding on to hope. A reporter approached Jessica for an interview. "What's the secret to Buddy's success?" the reporter asked. "What makes him so effective with these children?" Jessica looked down at Buddy, who lay at her feet watching a child in a wheelchair nearby. "It's not just training," she said. "It's love. It's grief. It's understanding what it means to feel lost and choosing to stay anyway. Buddy doesn't try to fix things. He just shows up. And sometimes that's enough." That night, back home, Jessica and Buddy sat outside on the porch as the sky turned golden with sunset. Birds chirped softly in the distance, and the wind rustled the trees gently. Jessica leaned back in her chair and looked at the horizon. "Tyler would be proud of you," she whispered. Buddy looked up, then stepped closer and placed his head gently in her lap. And as the last light of day faded into twilight, they stayed that way. Two hearts who had once been broken, now bound together in purpose. Their story, born from tragedy, had become a beacon for others, and in the quiet peace of that evening it was clear that love, real, enduring love, had not died. It had simply learned how to heal.